This video is going to serve as a way to give an example of how to use Excel. We're going to be going through a given data set, which is tax data for 2016 as provided by the IRS. And I downloaded the entire CSV, which is a comma delimited file. And it has all the information broken out by zip code, which is just going to be a general database that everyone will be able to access. And going to go through what a pivot table is, how that works, how we can add some basic things to that, formatting and such. And then in subsequent videos, we're going to go through different formulas, sum ifs, count ifs, so on and so forth, to be able to share how each one of those could apply to a given data set. So as you can see, I'm on the IRS website, and I'll include this in the description for the video. And then you can just download the video. Now, each one of the headers has its own particular name, and those headers have to be kind of translated. And the user guide, which is a Word document, is how we translate that. So just to kind of give you a brief overview, here's the Word document, and this shows what each one of the variable names mean, and then what it actually comes back with. So the 2650s, which are the total income amount in thousands of dollars, and the total of returns with income are some of the data points we'll be able to look at to see what the total amount of income by zip code or by state per tax return form is coming back. And this would apply to any data set you have out there. I'm just trying to use something that is kind of universal and everyone's going to have access to. That way people can play with the data in the same way and be able to share that. So I downloaded them. They're on my computer, and I've already opened it up. And just to kind of give you an overview, the 2650s, which are the ones I called out, are in 2650, which is the number of values. And then the A is the actual number of dollars. So if you divide this by this, that'll tell you for that zip code what the average number of dollars per return was, as a given example. And just to kind of go over the data set in a general sense, the state, the zip code, and then these are the classifications like 0 to 25,000, 25 to 50, all the way up to 6, which is 200,000 plus. So it gives a group by category, so you can see how many people are in each category and be able to break that out. And we're able to see those buckets here. A lot of this data I'm not really going to pay much attention to in a general sense. Just kind of do a simple pivot table and go from there. So the columns we're going to look at will be state and zip code. I'm going to highlight those in yellows. We may play with the AGI stub in our data set, and then we're going to play with the two 2650s, the number of returns and the actual dollars in that return bucket. Now, when we go to make a pivot table, the easiest thing to do is just click anywhere inside the table and hit pivot, and it's going to defaultly grab everything that's touching that. So if the data goes down to 179,779 rows, it's going to grab all that. We could say it goes from A1 down to that cell. So that would be the same thing as if I started here and I hit Control Shift right and went all the way over to EQ and then hit Control Shift down. It's going to go to that last cell, and I can hit down arrow again and it's going to grab all of EQ. So if I ever update this and provided more data, it would automatically grab that. Sometimes when people are doing reporting and they're going to do a pivot table, they'll defaultly set it on like the first 20,000 rows, and they add data later and they don't realize that the pivot table didn't go all the way down to the bottom. So I like to always just Control Shift and then down arrow, and then we'll see it's from A to EQ. So no matter if there's a million rows of data in here, it's going to show that data. And then where do we want to put this pivot table? We can put it on a new worksheet. Now, I am going to intentionally break this just because I've seen a lot of people have this error where one of their columns doesn't have a name, and they try to create that pivot table and they get an error message, and it says the field name's not valid. To create a pivot table, you must have it organized with labeled columns. And a lot of people don't get that, hey, I'm just missing a name. So the easiest thing to do there is just go figure out wherever you were missing that name. And we can see there's a blank there. We'll fill that in, and it will give us that. So once again, we'll create our pivot table. We're going to go all the way down to EQ, and we'll go ahead and start. And whenever I hit OK, it's going to bring up a new pivot table. And you can drag things from the raw data in there, and you can tell it how to summarize things. So we could get a list of all of our states. And if we drag that down here, it's going to put it in the rows. If we wanted the states across the top, we could put it over in this box, and it's going to put all the states across the top. And if we want to filter by a state, we can put it in the filters, and we're able to click on that, and then we can filter to something like Arkansas, or we can filter to California, or wherever state we want to see the data for. Now, I did say the 2650s are the ones that I wanted to look at, and if I search in this little box above here, it's going to actually pull up the pivot table things that align with what I searched for. So I'm going to bring in the number and the total dollars. And in the Word document, it says that these total dollars are in thousands of dollars. So we need to make sure we know that whenever we divide this out. And we can see that. So if I were to take the sum of this and divide by that, I can see that the average California tax return is $82,000. Now, you'll notice that I manually did this math and that worked, but if I want that to just defaultly be there in a pivot table, you can actually add that calculation to the pivot table. And if we click anywhere inside this pivot table, we can go to Fields, Items, and Sets, and we can click on Calculated Value. And we're going to call this Gross Income. And you can name it whatever you want. And we're going to take that 2650A, which is the amounts, and divide it by N, which is the numbers. And because I know this is in thousands of dollars and I want people to be able to understand my data set, I'm just going to times that total by 1,000. And we'll be able to see that same 82,000 there. And then I'm going to right click on it, go to Field Items, Set, or go to the number format, and I'll go to currency. I'm going to set it as dollars, and I'll hit OK. And now it's going to round it to the right amount. So that tells me the average California. Now, the cool thing is, if I pick another state, that's there. Now, when I did it in a formula, it would say 57 for Arkansas. And if I click on Alabama, it would say 57 as well. And that would all work. But the cool thing is, when I do the math inside a pivot table, I can drag state down, and now it gives it to me by every state. So it took that formula that I wrote for one of them, and it applies it to all of them now. So it makes it very easy to take a single calculation and apply it to any given field. And I could even drag the zip codes inside of this, and now I can see for Alaska all the different zip codes, and we can go through Alabama and see this. And you can sort by any one of these. So if I wanted to sort the zip codes, I can just click on a zip code and go to more sort options, and we're going to sort that descending by the gross income. And just to make this a little bit nicer, I'm going to get rid of these calculated fields. Now, since I did the calculation in the pivot table, I don't even need the numbers there. So we can just see the product of the math that we did. And when we did the math, we can see that the highest grossing zip code of Alabama is the 35223, which averages $344,029.20 average tax return for that. And we can see that the least income producing zip code in Alabama would obviously be at the very bottom. And that averages for 36610, $21,750.85. So we added a calculation, we broke it out. We can collapse all of these at once, and we'll just have the state. So now someone could deep dive and see the data for every particular state. We can also sort the states by their amount and see which state is the one that gains the most. And we'll click on the state, we'll click on sort options. We're going to go to descending, and then we'll click on gross income, and we'll see that DC is the highest at 97,000. Connecticut's the next at 96,000, so on and so forth. That is pretty well the basic of creating a pivot table. You take the raw data, you click on that insert pivot table, we add some math. We're able to show if we wanted to look at the weight of how many people or how many tax returns were in there, we could do that. And we can click on here, and we'll go back to our home tab and add a comma. And now we can see how many tax returns were for that. So New York has 18 million tax returns, whereas DC has 677,000 tax returns. We can also type over these. So we can put gross income, and you'll notice it gripes at me because the calculated field I created was already called gross income. And to fix that, I can just put a space before or after, or put 2 spaces between the words and it'll take it. And then this is number of tax return, or actually we'll do count of tax returns. And now we're able to see that. And you can always just double click on a column header to have them resize. And then pivot tables will kind of defaultly do that. The other thing worth mentioning is if we give it a splash of color, if we're going to send this to someone, it looks a little bit better. And I always like to turn off the, to go to our view section and turn off the grid lines. It just makes our report look a whole lot nicer. So now someone could easily pull up this report, go through the states and say, okay, what zip codes in DC make the most or the least or whatever. And we can see the 14,000 people who live in 20016 make significantly more than the people who live in the 20032. So we have our basic pivot table created. We can also put a pivot table next to it. And we'll just slide something over here and we'll pretty it up a little bit. And in this case, we're not going to leave the states. Well, actually, we'll break it out into the buckets, which was that AG sub. And the convenient thing about a pivot table is you can just type over a label. So 0 to 25K. And if we go back to our Word document and we look at those, it is 0 to 25, 25 to 50, up to 100, and then 100 to 200. So 0 to 25, 25 to 50K. 50 to 75K, 75 to 100K, 100 to 200K, and then 200 plus, 200K plus. So we have our 6 buckets. And I'm gonna hide the blanks just because they don't serve me any purpose here. So now we're able to see a grouping of all the states and what our buckets represent. Now the cool thing would be is if we could filter one pivot table and have it filter the other one. So if I told this side to only be New Jersey, which I can search for in J, you'll notice the other tab didn't adjust. And one way we can do that is it's called a slicer. And it allows us to filter multiple pivot tables. So we're going to pick a state by going to Analyze, Insert Slicer, and we'll click on the state. And then this gives me this little guy right here. And defaultly, all this does is filters that first table, and you'll notice nothing in the second table is changing. But you can go to Report Connections, and you can click on the second pivot table you want it to connect with. And now we can see how many tax returns are in each state based on their income bracket. So for Alaska, we could look at that and see that there's how much income on average the 200K plus makes, which is 400,000, and there's 29,300 of those tax returns. We can see the 0 to 25 on average make 11,000 with 218,750 tax returns in that grouping. So as we click through our states, we'll be able to do that. And you could always apply a conditional rule to kind of see what those buckets look like, and we could do something like that. I'm going to click on it and then I'll apply it to the to all the cells with the tax return in this table, and then I'll hit apply, and now we can see where that falls. Now in those options, the first option is anything, and then this one is there's an AGI stub, which is going to get rid of the grand total. So you'll notice that the colors were all on the grand total. If I apply it this way, now it colors it correctly. So this would allow you to see for each state where the kind of breakout of tax returns are. So we can see California has a whole lot more percentage-wise people in the 100 to 200K than Arkansas, Alaska, and Arizona, and Colorado likewise has a lot of people in that bucket. That's going to be the introduction for the pivot tables. In the subsequent videos, we're going to go through and work through some basic formulas, sum ifs, count ifs, index matches, how to look up data, how to cross-reference that. And then in following videos after that, we're going to step into Power Query, how we can avoid formulas and do things that are even faster by using Power Query to do those sums, to do those lookups and everything else. Hope you enjoyed the video, and feel free to check out any of the other ones that we get posted. Thank you. Have a good day.